Think about this for a moment. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're probably sitting in the same spot you always do when you watch YouTube. Maybe you grabbed the same snack, opened the same drink, or positioned yourself in that exact familiar way. What if I told you that this simple moment reveals the invisible force that controls nearly half of everything you do every day? Welcome to the fascinating world of habits, and today we're diving deep into one of the most groundbreaking books ever written about human behaviour. Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit isn't just another self-help book collecting dust on your shelf. This is a revolutionary exploration into the science behind why we do what we do, backed by cutting-edge neuroscience research, real-world case studies, and stories so compelling they'll completely change how you see your own behaviour. From the morning routine that sets your entire day in motion to the organisational habits that can make or break billion-dollar companies, Duhigg reveals the hidden patterns that shape our lives. But here's what makes this book absolutely mind-blowing. Duhigg doesn't just explain how habits work, he shows us how to hack them. He reveals the exact formula that governs every habit, the precise moment when habits become automatic, and most importantly, how ordinary people have used these principles to transform their lives completely. We're talking about real people who lost massive amounts of weight, athletes who achieved impossible performances, and entire organisations that revolutionised their cultures by understanding this one simple concept. Get ready to discover the secret code that runs your brain, because once you understand how habits really work, you'll never look at your behaviour the same way again. Let me paint you a picture of just how powerful this book really is. The Power of Habit takes you on an incredible journey through three distinct worlds, each revealing different layers of how habits control our existence. First, we explore individual habits and discover the neurological loops that govern our personal behaviours. Then we venture into organisational habits, examining how companies and institutions create cultures of success or failure. Finally, we dive into societal habits, exploring how entire communities and movements change through the power of collective behavioural patterns. What makes Duhigg's approach so brilliant is his ability to weave together rigorous scientific research with stories that feel like they're straight out of a thriller novel. You'll meet Eugene Pauly, a man who lost his memory but whose habits remained intact, revealing incredible insights about how our brains actually work. You'll discover how Target figured out a teenage girl was pregnant before her father did, just by analysing her shopping habits. You'll learn about the dramatic transformation of Alcoa under CEO Paul O'Neill, who revolutionised worker safety by focusing on a single keystone habit. The book reveals that habits aren't just random behaviours we've picked up over time. They're actually neurological patterns that our brains create to save energy and increase efficiency. Every habit follows the same basic loop. There's a cue that triggers the behaviour, a routine that we perform, and a reward that our brain receives. Once we understand this loop, we can begin to identify the cues and rewards that drive our behaviours, and more importantly, we can learn to change the routine in the middle. But here's where it gets really exciting. Duhigg doesn't just give us theory, he provides a practical framework for habit change that anyone can apply. He shows us how some habits are more powerful than others, how certain keystone habits can trigger widespread positive changes throughout our lives, and how we can use the power of belief and community to make lasting transformations. This isn't just about breaking bad habits or building good ones. This is about understanding the fundamental operating system of human behaviour. The implications are staggering. When you truly grasp these principles, you realise that success isn't about willpower or motivation. It's about understanding how to work with your brain's natural systems to create the life you actually want. Now let's dive into the main events and discoveries that make this book so revolutionary. Understanding these core concepts will give you the tools to literally rewire your brain for success. The first major revelation involves the neurological habit loop that governs all human behaviour. Duhigg introduces us to researchers at MIT who discovered that habits actually create neurological pathways in our brains. When we first learn a new behaviour, our brains are highly active, processing every decision and movement, but as behaviours become habitual, our brains essentially go on autopilot, following established neural pathways with minimal conscious thought. This is why you can drive home from work while thinking about something completely different, or why you automatically reach for your phone when you're bored. The second crucial discovery centres on the anatomy of habits themselves. Every habit consists of three components: the cue, the routine, and the reward. The cue is the trigger that initiates the behaviour. This could be a specific time of day, an emotional state, the presence of certain people, or a particular location. The routine is the actual behaviour or action we perform. The reward is the neurological payoff that reinforces the habit loop. What's fascinating is that our brains begin to anticipate the reward as soon as we encounter the cue, creating a powerful craving that drives the behaviour. The third major concept explores how habits can be changed through understanding this loop structure. Duhigg reveals that you can't simply eliminate a habit, but you can replace the routine while keeping the same cue and reward. This is called the golden rule of habit change. For example, if you have a habit of eating cookies when you're stressed, you need to identify the cue, stress, and the reward, perhaps comfort or a sugar rush, then replace the routine, eating cookies, with something else that provides the same reward, like taking a walk or calling a friend. The fourth significant revelation involves keystone habits, which are behaviours that spark chain reactions of positive change throughout our lives. These habits matter more than others because they create small wins that build momentum and establish cultures where positive changes can flourish. For individuals, keystone habits might include exercise, meditation, or keeping a food diary. For organisations, it might be safety protocols or regular team meetings. When Paul O'Neill became CEO of Alcoa, he focused exclusively on worker safety, which seemed unrelated to profits, but ultimately transformed the entire company culture and led to record financial performance. The fifth major discovery examines how willpower functions like a muscle that can be strengthened through exercise. Duhigg reveals research showing that people who regularly exercise their willpower in small ways, like using their non-dominant hand for routine tasks or maintaining perfect posture, develop greater self-control in other areas of their lives. However, willpower is also finite and can be depleted, which is why it's more effective to create automatic habits rather than relying on constant self-control. The sixth crucial insight explores organisational habits and how they shape company cultures. Duhigg shows how organisations develop institutional habits that can either promote success or create dysfunction. He examines the London Underground fire that killed 31 people, revealing how organisational habits around hierarchy and communication contributed to the tragedy. Conversely, he shows how companies like Starbucks create habits around customer service that become deeply embedded in their corporate culture. The seventh major revelation involves crisis as a catalyst for habit change. Duhigg demonstrates that major changes in habits often occur during periods of crisis or transition. This applies to individuals going through major life changes, organisations facing existential threats, and even entire societies during times of upheaval. Crisis creates an opportunity to examine and change deeply ingrained patterns because the usual automatic responses are disrupted. The eighth and final major discovery explores how social habits and movements create large-scale change. Duhigg examines the Montgomery bus boycott and shows how social movements succeed by transforming individual habits into collective action. He reveals that successful social movements typically follow a three-step process. They start with the strong social ties of friendship and family, spread through the weak social ties of communities and cliques, and are sustained by giving participants new habits and a sense of identity. These discoveries form the foundation for understanding not just how habits work, but how we can harness their power to create meaningful change in our lives and communities. Let me share with you the most valuable takeaways from this groundbreaking book, insights that can literally transform how you approach every aspect of your life. The first key takeaway is understanding that habits are not destiny. Many people believe they're stuck with their current patterns of behaviour, but Duhigg proves this is completely false. Every habit can be changed once you understand its structure. The key is not to fight against your habits, but to work with your brain's natural systems. This means identifying the cues that trigger your unwanted behaviours, recognising the rewards you're seeking, and consciously choosing new routines that provide the same rewards. The second crucial insight involves the power of small wins. Duhigg shows that sustainable change doesn't come from dramatic overhauls, but from small consistent victories that build momentum over time. When you focus on changing one small habit successfully, it creates a ripple effect that makes other positive changes easier to implement. This is why people who start exercising often begin eating better, managing their money more effectively, and becoming more productive at work without consciously deciding to change these other areas. The third essential takeaway centres on the importance of belief in habit change. Duhigg reveals that people who successfully transform their habits almost always have a strong belief that change is possible. This belief often comes from being part of a community or group that supports the change. This is why programs like Alcoholics Anonymous are so effective, not just because of their specific techniques, but because they create a community of people who believe recovery is possible and support each other through the process. The fourth vital lesson involves identifying your keystone habits. These are the habits that naturally trigger other positive behaviours throughout your life. For many people, regular exercise becomes a keystone habit that leads to better eating, improved sleep, increased productivity, and better relationships. The key is to identify which habits in your life have this cascading effect and focus your energy on maintaining and strengthening them. The fifth important insight teaches us about the role of environment and habit formation. Duhigg shows that changing your environment is often more effective than trying to change your willpower. If you want to eat healthier, don't keep junk food in your house. If you want to exercise more, lay out your workout clothes the night before. If you want to read more, place books in easily accessible locations throughout your home. Your environment should support the habits you want to develop and make unwanted habits more difficult to perform. The sixth crucial takeaway involves understanding habit stacking. This technique involves attaching new habits to existing ones using your current routines as cues for new behaviours. For example, if you want to start meditating, you might attach it to your morning coffee routine. After you finish your coffee, you immediately spend 5 minutes meditating. This leverages the existing neural pathways of your established habits to create new ones. The seventh essential lesson focuses on the power of tracking and measurement. Duhigg shows that people who track their habits are significantly more likely to change them successfully. This doesn't mean obsessive monitoring, but rather maintaining awareness of your patterns and progress. Whether it's using a habit tracking app, keeping a journal, or simply making check marks on a calendar, measurement creates accountability and helps you recognize patterns you might otherwise miss. The eighth important insight involves understanding that slip-ups are part of the process. Duhigg emphasizes that successful habit change isn't about perfect execution, but about getting back on track quickly after inevitable setbacks. People who successfully change their habits expect occasional failures and have plans for recovering from them. They don't view slip-ups as evidence that they're failures, but as normal parts of the learning process. The ninth crucial takeaway teaches us about the importance of rewards and celebrating progress. Our brains are wired to repeat behaviours that provide rewards, so it's essential to acknowledge and celebrate the positive changes we're making. This doesn't mean rewarding yourself with behaviours that undermine your goals, but rather recognising the intrinsic rewards of your new habits and occasionally celebrating milestones with appropriate treats or activities. The 10th and final key insight involves understanding that habit change is a skill that improves with practice. The more you work with your habits consciously, the better you become at identifying patterns, designing interventions, and creating lasting change. This skill transfers across different areas of your life, making each subsequent habit change easier and more likely to succeed. So what does all of this mean for you? The power of habits isn't just an interesting exploration of human behaviour, it's a practical manual for taking control of your life. Duhigg has given us something incredibly powerful, a scientific understanding of how we can consciously shape our automatic behaviours to create the life we actually want to live. The most profound realisation from this book is that we're not prisoners of our habits. We're not destined to repeat the same patterns forever. Every single day, we have the opportunity to recognise our cues, examine our routines, and choose different responses. This isn't about perfection or dramatic transformation overnight. It's about understanding that small, consistent changes in our habits can lead to remarkable improvements in every aspect of our lives. What makes this book truly revolutionary is that it shifts the focus from motivation and willpower to systems and processes. Instead of trying to force ourselves to change through sheer determination, we can work with our brain's natural tendencies to create automatic behaviours that serve us better. This approach is not only more effective, but also more sustainable over the long term. The implications extend far beyond personal development. Understanding how habits work can help us become better leaders, more effective team members, and more conscious participants in our communities. When we recognise the habit patterns in our organisations and societies, we can work to create positive changes that benefit everyone around us. Most importantly, this book reminds us that change is always possible. No matter how entrenched your current patterns might seem, no matter how many times you've tried and failed to change certain behaviours, the science shows that your brain retains the ability to form new neural pathways throughout your entire life. You have the power to reshape your habits and through them reshape your entire existence. The journey of understanding and changing your habits is one of the most valuable investments you can make in yourself. It's not just about breaking bad habits or building good ones. It's about becoming the conscious architect of your own behaviour, creating a life that truly reflects your values and aspirations rather than simply following the automatic patterns you've developed over time.